Hi, I'm Eddie Blass, and I'm talking to you from Adelaide as part of the Emergency Home Learning Summit from Learning Revolution. So I have an online learning company called the Inventorium, and basically it took me 4 years to develop this. And previous to that, I've worked in online learning for about 10, 11 years. And so what I wanted to do in this session is try and help you get some online learning success by really understanding the lessons that we've learned over all this time that we've been working in the online space, because for a lot of people it's new. And the key thing is, don't try to control what you can't. So the first thing is, I started doing online learning all the way back at the University of Derby in my academic career, which is about 15 years ago, where the university was a really early adopter of things like e-libraries to allow you to put together a textbook of different articles and chapters from books at the time when libraries were not digital. And we had a contract where we had to teach internationally, and the international government, instead of allowing our courses to be delivered by local tutors, required us to do the teaching from Derby. And so we did this remote video teaching, pretty much like a lot of teachers have been doing as part of the lockdown. And we did it about 15 years ago, when it was really, really early technology. And we almost like had to sit in a TV studio to make it work. And it was really difficult, and we learned a lot. We learned an awful lot. I then, over the years, ended up at the University of Hertfordshire in the UK in the School of Education, and really studied how people learn before I moved to Australia, where I headed up learning innovation at universities such as UNE, University of New England, and Torrens University in Think Education. And then I left academia to set up the Inventorium, which is an alternative high school provision for disengaged kids. And we work with kids who really are school refusers, and we have a 100% retention rate with this group of kids. So I've gone from that experience of the nightmare of teaching online through video to really successful online teaching with disengaged kids. And so what I wanted to do in this session is draw out for you some of those learnings. So I thought this was going to be a live session. So I was going to get you to post in chat, but it's a recorded session. But I've left these in as an example of how you would conduct a live session. So even though you might have students who are just watching, maybe they've got their videos turned off, you would ask a question to get them to post something in chat to start to get some engagement so that you know that they're there. So what you can control and what you cannot control. In a classroom, it's very different. You can control things in a classroom that you cannot control online. For example, there is no school bell when the kids are at home. So if you've got a family that's maybe got 3 kids and they're all in lockdown and your class starts at 11 a.m, the chances are all 3 kids are going to need to be on the computer for different Zoom sessions at 11 a.m, and the parents may have a meeting if they're working as well. So the requirement for everybody to manage their time, manage the technology, have the right amount of bandwidth for everyone to be online at a time is virtually impossible. So it's not going to happen. So the first thing that you lose control of is time. The second thing is you lose control of how present somebody is. So you cannot turn on and off people's cameras. Only they can. You can mute them, but you can't turn off their cameras. So it can be difficult to know sometimes if someone's actually there, or if they're saying, sorry, got low bandwidth, so I've switched off my video, and then they've actually disappeared off. You don't know. The third thing is, even if somebody is there, it's very hard for you to know if they're actually on task, because you can't see what they're doing. And so the final thing that you lose control of is how engaged they are with what you are teaching, because you don't get that kind of sense of feedback from the class. You get an energy, a buzz in the classroom that it's really hard to get online because of the remoteness. So a way of doing it is get them to post something in chat. So in this case, I would ask you to post in chat whether your school focuses on attendance or engagement. Just a quick poll. You could just ask the kids something quick, yes and no, and see what they do. And you could even use a poll if you're sophisticated with the technology. If you're not, get them to post it in chat. So the thing to do is actually to design your teaching for the no control classroom. So this is very much the flipped classroom. So you are going to give the students everything they need to know in advance so they can have watched that, so that you use the time differently when they're actually in class. And this is because time passes very differently online. So if I was giving a talk in a classroom, I could maybe talk for a whole hour. Well, I wouldn't talk for a whole hour, but you could maybe sort of stand at the front of the class and drive things for a whole hour. Whereas if you were to do that live online, you'd maybe get 30 minutes before people start dropping off. But if you pre-recorded it, it's even harder to watch. And now that I know this is pre-recorded, I'm trying to rush to get to it even quicker because I know how hard it is to watch pre-recorded. So time passes differently. Secondly, you need to focus on the kids engaging, not attending. So if they do the work, they do the online work outside of your Zoom session, doesn't matter, it's fine, it's done. The important thing is they've engaged with the learning. So use the technology to boost the engagement, not to control it. Set lots of small tasks to feed back on. You can use SMSs, text messages to check in on kids, send them a quick text message if you've not heard from them. You can set inquiry-based tasks that scaffold one on the other, and then get them to feed back on where they're at with one, and then maybe pair them up with another student to work online to do the next. So you really want to allow the students to select the focus and application, because kids will spend their day watching YouTube. So you want them to be watching YouTube that you want them to watch. Because most of the YouTube stuff that's produced on areas of study is better than we could produce ourselves. I mean, I cannot produce anything like National Geographic, for example. And the final thing I'd say is don't assume the worst, because if you assume that the student's going to be sitting at home doing nothing, not interested, then you start to design a very command control type learning experience. Whereas if you assume the students are going to love what you're teaching them, you start to make it really fun, because you're coming from a space where you're assuming the kids are going to get involved, and you design for that involvement. So on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being not scary and 10 being very scary, how does this design for no control classroom feel to you? Now I'm expecting, and see how again, that's just a quick poll to get you to reflect on what I'm talking about, make sure you've understood the learning, engage in the chat. So even if you wandered off and made a cup of tea while you were listening to this, this brings you back in to engage you and think about what was there previously. So what we learned from the inventorium, and this is for those of you who went for the 10s or that end of the spectrum. Firstly, moving to no control teaching is very, very difficult for teachers. Parents generally find it easier than teachers. And this is because teacher training teaches teachers to be in control of the classroom, to be in control of the curriculum, to be in control of the content, for everything to be standardized. And once you move to a no control way of doing things, there is no standardization. So assessment then needs to be personalized to each student. So you might set a task, for example, of students needing to consider the impact of demographics on the spread of previous spreads see, I've got a cold on the brain, I was going to say COVID, but you can maybe look at previous flu pandemics, or like the Spanish flu pandemic, and see which countries dealt best with it, which didn't, and why. Now, different students will pick different countries because they'll have their own heritage, their own ideas, their own interests. And so you then get them to share what they found out, so that they share the knowledge that they get from different countries, but you haven't actually said which country you're going to assess them on. So the assessment starts to become more personalized. And then each country would have done it differently. So then you see how that works. Kids will do better if they don't have time constraints. Some will go faster, some will go slower. Doesn't matter. So long as they have a task to do and they then report back or feed back into a group, once everyone's fed back into the group, you can move on to the next task. Or you can maybe set like a day or something, but don't set like 20 minutes, because some kids won't get going and find the answer in the 20 minutes. They'll need 2 hours. Others will have it done in 10. So as kids learn to manage their time and learning, you'll find that they start to take control and they'll head off in places you wouldn't imagine. So you may find that someone would look at, say they're looking at the flu pandemics, the Spanish flu pandemic that happened previously, and they choose African countries, and they might discover that actually since then Africa, they were looking at Ebola, and there was a lot of lessons from Ebola that they've learned for COVID, and they might want to discuss that, and then look at how different viruses develop, and then look at all different types of things, which wasn't where you were going, but their natural sense of inquiry will take them somewhere else. And that's why that kind of no control design leads you to spaces you wouldn't necessarily have gone otherwise, and interdisciplinary out of your subject. But don't worry about it. The kids are learning, they're engaged, they're having fun, they're being curious. Let them follow their natural instinct of inquiry as to what they are interested in. So things that you need to stop doing, which is hilarious given that this is a PowerPoint presentation. Stop using PowerPoint presentations for more than 15 minutes. Actually chat with them. So maybe present a couple of things and then like just stop and chat and see what questions people have and ask them to do a quick Google search and what do they find and what's the headline, and look up the news, find a video, what do they find? So it's not, you use the time differently. Trying to replicate what you do face-to-face online does not work. So stop doing it. Stop worrying that kids are falling behind. Focus on engagement and outcomes. They may not be learning exactly what you would have taught them in the classroom. Doesn't matter. They're learning, they're improving, they're expanding their knowledge, and that is education. So they will develop. They may not have covered exactly the content you would have covered, but if they had done, you'd have lost them because they'd have been bored, because it wasn't what they wanted to learn at home. And when they're at home and they don't have the discipline of a teacher standing over them, making them do something, they're going to do what they want. So the trick is to let them learn about what they want and guide that learning in a way that achieves your outcomes. Don't worry about attendance. There's all sorts of reasons for kids not being on Zoom, including parents, bandwidth, other family members needing the computers, all sorts of things. Stop worrying about managing time as if there was a school bell. There is no school bell at home. It's impossible for parents to manage a house like it's a school. And finally, and I really mean this to all you teachers out there, because I'm watching a lot of Facebook chat posts and stuff, stop working excessive hours. You need to manage your time differently also. So if you've got an hour session with kids, maybe do 30 minutes of that on Zoom, and then respond to emails and SMS and forums and chat groups, all the rest of it in the other half hour. Set that as the expectation. The kids will be better at attending, they'll be more engaged. You'll get other kids contacting you through different means of technology who weren't on the Zoom session, and you've built that into your day rather than thinking you've got to be physically present on Zoom for the whole hour and then doing all the additional technological conversation outside of your school day working hour. Teachers are going to burn out the way they're working at the moment. And the kids are as well, you know, it's just taking too much time. So I would like to thank you for being here and listening to my presentation. If you have any questions, please do email me at eddie@inventorium.com.au. If this was a live presentation, I would now stop screen sharing and ask for questions and maybe pick on a few people, or maybe set you into breakout groups and get 3 or 4 of you to chat about the slide on what you need to stop doing and what you'd find difficult about that, or any ideas that people have got, what people agree with, what they don't agree with. There are so many ways you can take the chat forward. So I would just like to thank you very much for watching this session, and if you do have any questions, please do contact me. Thank you.